It's my immense pleasure to be joined once again by James, who, as you can see, as you will see in a minute, is serving in the armed forces of Ukraine. We're going to be talking about what he's been up to since the last conversation. And if you find this fascinating, do please check out our previous conversation on the channel, which was about 9-10 months ago, February kind of time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're going to put that in the description so you can find that easily. Without further ado, though, I'm going to ask James to say a couple of words about himself, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, well, what he's allowed to talk about. Unfortunately, he's got a lot more interesting stuff that he can't talk about, but that's the way it goes. James, I'm delighted to meet you here.
Thank you. Yes, I'm actually in Azov, so I'm in the Azov International Battalion. So that's Azov 12th Brigade, 3rd International Battalion, and I'm head of the fiber optic FPV laboratory for the battalion. So
that's fantastic. And we've had this conversation before. Of course, FPV fiber optics was something that Russia innovated and then scaled, or at least that's the story that's out there.
So it's an interesting thing. Actually, there's a group who you might have talked to called Technology United for Ukraine that I guess brought the original fiber optic drones to Ukraine, but then Russia scaled it first.
Yes.
So this reveals kind of a problem that Ukraine has with scaling production. Frankly, now that's changing, and that's a big part of what I'm doing. What I'm working on is scaling up that capacity. Basically, it's the most important thing right now.
Is it a problem also of seeing an opportunity? Because we've talked a lot about hierarchy, about Soviet mentality, risk aversion. We've talked about scarcity before we hit recording, which is all these things tie in together.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that when you're in a scarcity mentality, it also prevents you from seeing an opportunity or taking a risk.
Very much so.
And actually, Russia's not known for this as well, but in this particular instance, they seem to see the opportunity and act on it first.
Well, there's different ways to scale. There's centralized scaling, which is feudal monarchy or oligarchy type scaling, power vertical that Russia has. Ukraine has the great advantage of having this distributed social, lack of hierarchy that is inherent to their nature. I'm not saying they don't have oligarchy; they do, but that's kind of an outside alien thing. So there's a strong rejection in Ukrainian culture, and this also holds true in much of the military, and I would say also in terms of scaling technology, against that sort of centralization. If you think about it, for those of your viewers who are very much pro-capitalist, in many ways Ukrainian society is very much a capitalist dream, in the sense that everybody is highly competitive with each other. So every little tech company, even different battalions, different brigades, different companies within a battalion are competitive with each other, potentially. And this produces good things, and it produces bad things, But the scarcity mentality, comes from, think about the Holodomor, think about 200-300 years of colonialism and constantly being stolen from, mostly by Russians, and that has led to a sort of generational trauma that is prevalent throughout almost all of the culture here today. And it produces good things as far as like survival mechanisms. They're very good at surviving here against all odds, but scaling that survival into successfully overwhelming the Russians is a struggle.
One thing which is, I think, interesting here is Ukrainians also have this will to fight and resist. Now, I've had many conversations recently about Bandura and the more complex relationship Ukrainians have with it.
Oh, yeah.
Because our Western way, where we're very, dare I say, tribal. I think we use that slightly different sense in Britain than they do in the US. It has other connotations, but we're very easy to split and divide based on political ideologies.
Right.
So we would see someone like Bandera as through a purely political prism, and we might be aghast at some of the things, he might have believed or said or whatever, or even done. But Ukrainians have a more complex thing, which I think is interesting. It's something we might need to learn if we're going to resist Russian aggression. And that is what they admire about him universally, even if they have no connection with his politics whatsoever, is the willingness to resist an invader. The will to go in and not just fight, but to essentially, realize that there's a high probability you're not going to come back, but resist anyway.
Well, it's important to separate the propaganda there, because it's important to separate what Stepan Bandera did and who he was versus all of the Russian propaganda since. And it's very important to understand that Stepan Bandera spent almost the entirety of World War II in a Nazi prison, okay? Because the Nazis didn't like him, and they didn't want to work with him. Most of the atrocities when they talk about the Banderites and the Nazi collaboration took place after he was deposed as head of the UPN or UPA. Oh my gosh, I forget which one. The Ukrainian independence movement in Western Ukraine. They imprisoned him for writing a treatise on Ukrainian independence. He basically made a Ukrainian declaration of independence, and they imprisoned him. And then they co-opted the organization. The organization was 25% Jewish. Okay, they kicked out all the Jewish people, and then took the rest of them and manipulated them, brought in a bunch of new people. This is what the Nazis did. Okay, during World War II in that era.
And tarnished it. And then, of course, the Soviets were happy to pile on with another layer of demonization.
Exactly. Yeah. So the association that the Russians have, they use the word Banderite as a synonym for Nazi, which is entirely propaganda-based, And it's absolutely not to defend anything that any of those Nazis or their collaborators did at all. It's important to understand the true history. And now that I've been here a while, you just go read the Wikipedia article, guys. It's not that hard.
It's out there if you want.
Yeah.
Just don't read any of,
the
certain
stuff.
journalists' early, writings about Ukraine, especially in the 2000s, where it's like it's Nazis everywhere, etc., etc. And of course, we know from modern Russia, they will label anyone a Nazi.
Right.
Who resist them. It's about resisting their power.
There's nothing ideological about the word. It seems in Russian culture, Nazi just means anybody who doesn't like us. That's all. That's all.
Or won't submit to our authority.
But it makes sense because actually, the communists, the Russians, were doing the same things all along, like from the Holodomor and the suppression of all kinds of different cultures throughout the Soviet Union, and all sorts of genocides in Poland, sometimes on the same site as the sites where the Nazis did genocide. It's also a really important thing to remember that, yes, the Soviet Union suffered more deaths than any other country in World War II, but most of those deaths were Ukrainian, okay?
And Belarusian.
Yeah, and Belarusian, and not actually Russian. And especially if you count the Jews that were forcibly deported from Ukraine and Belarusia, then I don't know what the math is there, but the Russians are basically using someone else's trauma as their own. That's really what it is.
This, of course, brings us to Azov, because the demonization of this regiment. I just went to a rally of the Azov-style defenders, which is a great rallying point for activists around the world.
Yeah.
But I get the impression that one of the reasons why this demonization of Azov is so important to Russia is because, one, there have been compliant journalists who've been quite happy to fall into that trap of seeing everything in black and white terms, blah, 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 all Nazis, etc. But the real reason, if we look beyond that, the real reason is that they don't like units that are cohesive. They don't like units who have a strong fighting spirit, who are perhaps innovative, or just have the will to resist. And Azov is one of the most effective units in the Ukrainian army.
Yeah. I mean, per capita, for sure. There's so many things there. First of all, it's really important to understand, as I have recently come to understand, how small Azov is compared to the rest of the Ukrainian army. It was, I think it got up to about 5,000 total early on in the war. But they've always been around between like 1,000 and 5,000. Now they're up to a core, and so they're growing much faster necessarily, which is really great. But they started in 2014. After the Maidan Revolution, when the invasion happened, and it was basically just a bunch of kind of whacked out guys on the shores of the Sea of Azov. Specifically in Berdyansk, is where they kind of gathered and said, "Man, we got to do something about these Russians. We got to defend our city of Mariupol." And so the existing Ukrainian forces, I mean, the Ukrainian army was incredibly small and not prepared in any way for that invasion,
and stripped out by Yanukovych.
Exactly. I mean, and so they had like 2 AKs and a bunch of like rebar. That's what they were fighting with, and a couple of like armored trucks or armored vans. But because they had been training, they were able to take back and defend the city of Mariupol, and that's the internal story that Azov tells itself. The way I think about it is, it's important to understand about me. So half my family's black, okay, potentially the better half. My son is half black, and I have a sister and 3 brothers on the black side, and I love them. And so I'm not right wing at all. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't have joined Azov. In fact, I did not join Azov because I did believe a lot of the propaganda, actually. Even, when I first came here in 2019, I thought about not necessarily going to fight, but, doing something to help with the conflict and stuff. And I even had Ukrainians tell me, no, you don't want to be associated with that. That's all a bunch of Nazis in Donetsk. I mean, even Ukrainians believed it. That propaganda has been very effective. I think in Azov's case, I think I was saying earlier, Jonathan, we all have our internal stories, right? So the story that you tell yourself about who you are, maybe you tell other people too, and I tell people about, I can tell my story in 10 or 20 minutes, is very different from the impression that someone might get from watching this video for 10 minutes, okay? That's a very different story. Somebody probably says, oh, he's this American soldier guy with a weird beard. I don't know, something. Pick out some thing that sticks out, right? So Azov's own internal story is the story of we fought these battles, we defended Ukraine. Why? And then a few people stuck their neck out and flew these, stupid swastika flags or whatever. Why are they don't, how do you change that narrative?
They don't represent us,
Yeah, they don't
represent. It's just a tiny part of the backstory.
Exactly. And now, I'm happy to say that, like, when I had my interview for the International Battalion, it was a little bit intense. The interviewer was like, we went through all the basic stuff and qualifications, and he was like, you need to understand that we don't tolerate any racism, and you will respect women. And I was like, okay, I promise.
Yeah, I didn't have to twist my arm on that one.
No. But, it's easy to slip back into that, especially, I think, because as an international battalion, we've got a bunch of young men, and young men, I'm no longer a young man, I recognize this fact, young men growing up in this internet era have been so suffused with this sort of alt-right 4chan, it's okay to make Hitler jokes kind of a thing, and we have to constantly clamp down on that, honestly. And it doesn't mean that they have that that is their mentality at all. It's that, how do you say this? Jokes are what makes comedy, right? It's when something bad happens but no one gets hurt, right? That's the original Greek definition, right? It's opposed to a tragedy, right? So jokes are inherently transgressive, okay? But to make them funny, they have to be more transgressive than your normal life. When you're fighting in a war is arguably the most transgressive thing that can happen to anyone, anywhere, right? So how are you going to tell jokes when you're in this incredibly transgressive environment? You have to say something that's more extreme than what you've already just endured.
Hence the Ukrainian dark humor. There's already a foundation for that already.
The Ukrainian humor, infantry humor, it's all very, very dark. So, and that's extremely important for morale, right? So where do you draw the line between, oh, it's just dark humor, and oh, this is an ideology now? You know, and how do you maintain morale, but also be like, no, we're not training or harboring small mustache men? You know, so I appreciate that balance that has to be struck, but also do not tolerate any sort of like small mustache men ideology. You know, and we absolutely don't. There was a time, though, in the early days, where that was tolerated, because if that's all you have, right? All you've got is, we got to get people together. We got to go defend Mariupol. Who are we going to choose? Are we going to like, if you're in America and there's a zombie apocalypse, are you going to care if the hick down the street with all the guns has a Confederate flag on the back of his truck? No, you're going to be like, give me your guns.
Yeah, right? You know how to use them.
Yes.
You know.
Let's go. You know, and that is exactly the situation.
Yeah.
You know,
there's a film script there. Let's turn to technology, because of course I think one of the interesting aspects, and I was a brave one, which is extraordinarily interesting. But we've both come from something of I'm more of a marketing tech background, but you're from an actual tech background, engineering background. But I have interacted with a lot of certainly software engineers. Many of whom come from a physical engineering background as well. We're talking about scale, technologies, scale, innovation, seeing opportunities, the ability to scale them up. We've only got a few minutes here, so we're going to do a much longer piece on this.
Sounds good.
But what you're bringing here, I think, is a different perspective into a unit like Azov, where you don't have this generational trauma, or at least if you do, it's a different kind. It doesn't prevent you seeing opportunities, innovating,
I do, but I've processed it. I've processed my trauma thoroughly. Yes.
So what can you talk about what you're doing and what you bring to the fight, as it were?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say very much a Silicon Valley abundance mentality. I'm a network and systems engineer. I built internet infrastructure throughout the Southwest, and then I was senior network systems engineer on the NASA Ames Research Center campus for Singularity University on the private side. But yeah, just basically worked in IT. But what I'm trying to bring is to get away from the scarcity mentality of, oh my God, we don't have enough, we're never going to have enough, to no, there's millions, potentially billions, or at least a billion, I don't know, something, a lot of people all over the world who really want to support Ukraine, and they're trying to find ways. Grandma sitting at the table somewhere in Arizona or something, living on her pension, and she sends $10-15 a month to any Ukrainian unit that she sees, and a lot of people see the results that Azov has gotten and how that's being replicated throughout the entire Ukrainian armed forces, and they see the value that Azov has, and also, I regard Azov's journey from the shores of the Sea of Azov through this descent, if you will, into this bad reputation and being labeled as a terrorist group, and now being like a core, the first core of the Ukrainian armed forces. is a little bit of like a hero's journey.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
then you've got Third Assault and others who are now following in
Right.
the footsteps,
Well,
as it were.
Third Assault was part of they were the same, and then they were split by the Ukrainian government. I think in part maybe to separate, because of the reputational problems. They needed to take some of that ability and start replicating it within the general army. You got to remember, Azov is part of the National Guard of Ukraine, as opposed to Third Assault Brigade, which is part of the regular armed forces. So in many ways, they get a lot more support, and we are
more kit maybe as well. Or,
yeah, definitely. And Azov has historically, being part of the National Guard, has. First of all, we were prohibited from using Western weapons, even if we found them on the battlefield, like heavy weapons. Okay, even though our primary guns we use ARs, by the way. UAR is our primary, not AKs. But so that kind of became like a thing. It's almost a mentality now within at least within the brigade, is like, we are an infantry brigade, but that happened out of necessity. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to do is build capacity and build the belief and the trust that there are people out there who want to support Azov, and especially our international battalion. This is a huge, arguably an experiment. The 3rd International Battalion is it's a little over 50% international. So there's kind of a skeleton framework of Ukrainians, and we all work together. It's really it's a lot of fun. Is what I would say. But there's such a potential there to build relationships internationally, and to build help and support internationally. And so I have a website. It's whyukraine.com, and we have an Azov International website for our battalion, and there's an Azov One website, which is for fundraising. Azov One set up for us specifically, though, a link specifically for fundraising for our battalion, and the first part is going to the fiber optic drone lab. So if you go to my website, which is Ukraine.com.
It'll be in the description. We'll pop that in
Excellent.
the description, yeah.
The first thing you'll see there is a big link that says, click here to support the Azov International Battalion, 3rd International Battalion. And if you can donate there, that will help us get some incredibly important equipment that we need for our fiber optic laboratory. You asked about technical things. The fiber optic drones are ongoing. They're becoming more and more common on the battlefield, but there's ongoing innovation happening all the time in these labs that are very, very close to the front line. I'm here in Kyiv today, but my laboratory that I just left yesterday is very close. Okay, it's drones.
We won't say where exactly, but
we got booms going on all around me every day. But it's necessary. You have to be close to the guys who are doing the work. We're not manufacturing drones. Every drone that comes to us has to be modified to fit the mission in some way, change frequencies, different munitions, for example. And then we do get drones that already have the fiber optic connected to them, but we can also take existing FPV drones and attach fiber optic spools to them. Okay, so what we're setting up now is these fiber optic spools. The problem is they can have a failure rate of 40-50%. Okay, it seems like, you solve all the problems of radio interference, but then optical fiber, this tiny uncoated, less than the width of human hair, totally unprotected fiber, brings it with it a whole other load of problems. And what we have found, and what my one of the other units, our brigade, has found, and I think others as well, is that if you are using cheap equipment to make the connections, right? You have to fuse the fiber together. You have to fuse it with the connector. It's glass, right? It's glass. So you have to have this thing, and then you have to test it to see how far the lasers will go down the fiber. If you don't have quality equipment to do that, then you're not going to have quality performance of your drone when it flies. And this is why the base failure rate of these drones can be as high as 40 to 50%. So imagine you're a drone operator and you have to physically haul these drones 5 up to even 20 kilometers, okay, out to the position, dodging drones the whole way, and you've got 30, 40 drones on your back or whatever it is. And then you get there and half of them don't work. That's awful, you know.
It's a risk to your life, to your operator's life, and obviously you're not creating opportunities on the battlefield. You're less effective.
Exactly, exactly. So this is why we desperately, desperately need this equipment. It's going to be about $40,000. You know, like you were saying earlier, the Azov doesn't get as much as some of the other units do, you know?
And they're doing the job that others don't want to do necessarily. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, man. And that is the thing that we do. You know, there are other Special Forces units and also a 3rd Assault Brigade. It's an assault unit. It's a Special Forces assault unit. Goes into the areas to attack or attack, oftentimes to, you know, go into the real teeth of the bear, and then allow the other frontline units, not Azov, just regular military units, to rotate out or retreat in an orderly fashion. So really, really saving lives. And if you can support us, whyukraine.com, if you can support our efforts, you will literally save Ukrainian lives.
That's a great place to stop there. I know in these sort of videos in the field, sort of people's tolerance for long conversations is less because there's background noise.
Great.
But I think there's fantastic information here. James is always open to people who have, let's say, strong ideas, strong funding ideas. Don't tell him about your wacky ideas for technology that'll end the war in 5 minutes. Please, don't do that. He's a busy guy. But if you have a genuine idea on how you can support raise funds in your local community, or you know, if there's things you want to do with vehicles or whatever, reach out and ask.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and we're going to be doing a longer version of this, going into some of the detail. I know people are super keen to hear more of the detail.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, we'll pair up with, you know, Alex Ferguson or someone.
Yeah.
Go into some of the sort of you know, more detailed stuff.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
People appreciate.
Yeah, I work with his group as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's a fabulous chap. Well, that's it for today. James, thank you so much for everything you do, for your service, for what your colleagues and comrades are doing, essentially saving Europe, even if, you know, they're not entirely conscious. That's what's happening.
Right. Well, someday. Дуже дякую.
No, дуже дякую.
До побачення, everybody.
Many of you generously contributed to buying a truck, a 4x4 vehicle, for the armed forces of Ukraine in our recent marathon fundraiser for Kharkiv, Ukraine. That vehicle was delivered thanks to your generosity and refitted in Lviv with life-saving reinforcements, the doors, windows and the engine area. That vehicle was destroyed a few weeks after it was delivered at the front in a drone attack. All 3 servicemen survived with only minor scratches and concussion. Your generosity in funding the vehicle was instrumental in saving the lives of all 3 Ukrainian soldiers. Now we are launching our Christmas Tree Trucks 2025 campaign. The goal is to raise €11,000. So please help us buy another vehicle for one of the most effective Ukrainian brigades on the 4th Christmas of Ukraine's epic fight for survival against an imperialistic and genocidal neighbouring state. Help us celebrate the heroism of the soldiers who have held the line against all the odds, who fight for their freedom and pay a terrible price, while also, incidentally, protecting the freedoms of Europe.